So,
I walked up there.
yes. You know what?
You didn't. I had us muted, and when I unmuted, everything comes on mute.
Is it gonna work?
I'm hopeful today that I don't screech and come on that I'm recording. I'm always better prepared.
Good to have enough players. You intentionally do it that way during hearings, right?
Makes things run shorter.
Okay. We're going to reconvene the meeting after the executive session. The next item on is approval of the agenda and approval of minutes. Are there any changes that need to be made to the agenda at this time?
There are not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, did anyone peruse the minutes of the previous meetings that are up for approval at this
I
time?
did, Chairman.
Okay, is that a motion to
I would make
approve?
a motion to approve the
Both
minutes
sets.
as written.
Okay,
Second.
okay, any discussion? Anyone notice anything that needed changed within either of those sets of minutes? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the ESPA stipulated mitigation plan. And we have our Lieutenant Governor here today to report. And we appreciate him taking the time to come and be with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Someone asked me how I was this morning, and I said I'm happy. And I am happy. I'm happier now that Jennifer turned the mic on though. So I have a few thoughts here. I'm going to assume that most of my audience knows mostly what we're talking about here. And, but I think that as I make remarks about the state and it doesn't matter where we go, this is the only thing people want to talk about is did we get the water agreement? And while there's still process that has to happen, without boxing the director in, we got the water agreement. And I think that there are 4 or 5 things here that I want to emphasize why this is going to work better than the previous ones. They all agreed up front to quit fighting. So they stayed everything that has to do with this. And I think that signals a willingness to work together and to make this thing work. I think that it's a 12-year agreement with 3 points where 3 4-year increments that you don't go into the next 4 years if the last 4 years didn't work good. And I think that maybe another one of the things that we tended to gloss over this time that will become increasingly important, and I would ask you all within your spheres of influence to make sure that this happens, is the advisory board component of this agreement. If these people don't continue to talk, and if they don't continue to address issues as they pop up, and if they let them fester, then I will predict that we will be back in a May of 2024 situation somewhere down the road, because the lack of communication will doom this to failure as it did previous mitigation plans. I think that they're back to my acronym. I'll quickly click off the acronym that I've been using is PRAM. This is going to be a better agreement because it's proportional. The efforts before had to be collectively accomplished. Now they can be individually accomplished. And to sum that up, if you do yours, you get the benefits of safe harbor. If I don't do mine, I get the consequences of not living inside the agreement, which is curtailment. Gone will be the days where we have hundreds of thousands of acres that will be through the process of hyperbole used to drive the politics around this. The ones that do will get safe harbors. The ones that don't will not. And I think that's a very important component of this thing. I think this puts framework and structure around private recharge. All recharge is not created equal. This recognizes that if you want one-for-one credit, you do it where it moves the needle. And that, I think, is a good component. I think that collectively, they have agreed to reduce their pumping by 205,000 acre feet, or approximately 12% across the aquifer, but that translates what is left after reduce is your allocation. And your allocation can be augmented through proper private recharge. And, you know, so it's not only a conservation measure, but it's also something that can ameliorate your individual situations, and there's structure and framework around that I think will serve us well. We're only going to do private recharge if we think that we can use it again. And so this whole concept of averaging that we all agreed had to be in any future plan. I'm going back to the discussions in June, but that morphed into, so allocation, and you divide that out across to everybody down to the farmer level, but doing it by year to year allocation, that starts, that falls apart because there's no such thing as an average year. And there's no such thing as an average crop. I mean, every farmer employs a crop rotation. The weather deals us a different hand every year. And so what we came up with was this 4-year allocation, or 4-year water block, that empowers the management decisions back at the farmer level. Here's your allocation. When it's gone, it's gone. Yeah, you can make it a little better if you choose through private recharge, but when it's gone, it's gone. And so manage your situation accordingly. Hot, dry year, yep, they happen. Here's your allocation. Great year, yep, they happen sometimes. Here's your allocation. Put some away for a dry year. We high centered for a while on how, if we got credit, if we got more water through this process at the end of the 4 years, how does that roll into the next 4? So we spent time on that. I think we have a good way that under certain conditions that can roll forward. Again, you have the 12-year agreement that can be a 16 and a 20-year agreement, these increments of 4 years, because these 4-year water blocks lend itself to a 4-year compliance period. And again, if the advisory committee is working, you'll be able to steer around problems if we choose. And of course, none of this works if we're not measuring. And so this, the management, the agreement calls for robust, or let's say more robust, measuring than we've done in the past. Now that will be as technology exists to have the meters read every 10 minutes or whatever you set them to. But this calls for you square the books up every month now, and that's a vast improvement. None of us wanted to ever return to the 2021 or 2022 when we didn't know what we had done in 21 until May of 22. You cannot manage you can't administer anything without timely measurements. So I think that those are kind of the high points here. I could get off in the weeds easily on any of these subjects. We had a lot of meetings this summer, and we had frank, open conversations. That's a euphemistic way of saying that, yeah, they were mad at each other and they vented on each other. But once they recognized that they were stuck with each other, then they started working it out. Stuck with each other, and we removed the lawyers from the room. Anyway, once those two things happened, then the farmers were able to get the guts of this agreement in principle. Then lawyers are needful, and we brought them back in, and they captured the principles that everybody had talked about and ran all of the what if scenarios that fertile minds can generate. And I think we got something that it can be functional. I think it is realistic, and If we'll just let it work, I think that it will work. Again, pointing back to this advisory committee that, after the end of the summer, nobody wanted to talk about advisory committees because they were sick of meetings and they were sick of meeting together. But 6 months from now, they're going to need to meet. They're going to need to talk. There's going to be stuff that pops up that we'll make assumptions on it that'll be different than the other guy's assumptions. And if we don't get the skunk on the table regularly, then this thing will have problems. And I hope that happens. I'll do what I can to make that happen. Now, and I'll pan back one more layer here. My fellow Idahoans, not one time all summer long did we hear these 4 words. We didn't hear Republican, we didn't hear Democrat, we didn't hear liberal, we didn't hear conservative. They just had a common problem and they rolled their sleeves up and fixed it or came up with a solution. Now, and I would humbly submit that many of Idaho's problems fall into this category, but if we this caricature, this stereotyping, this putting people into boxes because we've already got them figured out, did not serve us well. It was when Brian hosted Bingham County people at Twin Falls, and they walked through. People started understanding the positions on the other side of the table, and they saw that the stereotypes started falling away, and that they didn't understand it as well as they thought they understood it. And so this whole concept of doubting our infallibility is, I think it's integral as we solve problems going forward. And what I saw in this whole water exercise, I think is a reason to be optimistic as we try to live with each other in communities. And it's never going to be easy. It never has been easy. This wasn't easy, but we did it. Now, again, it will fall apart if we don't keep talking. And so we're going on a little victory tour this afternoon, victory lap, whatever. I don't mean to be facetious here, but we're going to fly around the state and meet with stakeholders in Idaho Falls and Twin Falls, and I haven't seen the itinerary, but this will be the tone of my remarks. There is this call to action is going to be to continue to talk. We've got a framework here that I'm proud of. If you'd ask me in the afterglow of the 2015 agreement, I was proud of that, but it didn't work. And so I don't know. There's no guarantees going forward. I mean, we're just going to do the best we can, but we know what doesn't work. And what doesn't work is going to your respective corners and slinging barbs and arrows. So I stand for questions, Mr. Chairman. And I must say that we made a pretty good team, you and I, Mr. Chairman. And when I would get when I started being me sometimes, that Jeff was not mad and I was, anyway, so we made a decent 1-2 punch at times. And I think that it was integral to our success. And I can't say enough good, Jeff. I don't want to do it again, but we did it
right back at you. Yeah, it was one of those experiences that you wouldn't trade the world for, but wouldn't pay 10 cents to relive it. So
we now have a postgraduate degree in, I don't know, something, but we're smarter than we were 6 months ago.
Yeah, you did a great job.
I'm not fishing for that, but anyway,
well,
it was good. Again, you get these down in minutes. I want to read them again in 2 or 3 years. Compare where we are to where we were. But I think we got the makings of something that can work here. And if it doesn't, and we'll talk, we'll fix it to something better there.
Yeah, and the difference between 2015 and now is there's clarity. And everybody understands and a lot of people, I don't think, understood what they had agreed to, or they thought they agreed to something that wasn't in the agreement. And now I think we have a good agreement, and the attorneys, yes, they took a lot of time and they did a lot of wordsmithing, but I think it's made a very understandable agreement. I think if we get to a hard spot, that agreement will guide us in how to get through it.
Yeah,
So
I think that's true. If one of the, well, I won't mention names, but this was a prominent name, said, this is, probably a good thing that all this happened. And I was not in the mood to hear that day because I didn't think that the tractor parade was a good idea. But it did elevate this clear across the region. And now everybody is vested in this, and or at least they at least have some walk around knowledge of it. And I think that that's a net good thing, because we're not going to get any more water in our systems than we have right now. And we're going to there are going to be increased demands for it. And so we're stuck with each other as we divvy that out. And anyway, so this broad elevation of the issue is a net good thing, although it brings a lot of more personalities, a lot more people that don't really understand it, but it's okay.
hey, we have it, and it's great. Board members, do you have any questions for the Lieutenant Governor? Brian.
Chairman Scott, just one comment. I was proud of the 2015 agreement too, but I think a lot of us knew from the start that if you set goals impossibly high, you're not going to achieve them. And I think that's something this new agreement doesn't have. If you can't reach the goal, then you find some way to get out of it.
Right.
And this one, I don't think has that. Like Jeff said, everybody understands, I think, what they agreed to.
This has plenty of off ramps. I mean, if you want to bilaterally blow this up, you can. If you want to unilaterally blow it up, you probably can. But if you want to make it work, it's going to take bilateral effort. So
Well, and I don't think anybody had any way to know that the goals in the 2015 agreement were unrealistic. They were based on the best information that everyone had at the time they agreed to those goals. And there was the aquifer model's been improved, and it tells us something different now than it told us in 2015. So, and we're going to be smarter in another 8 years, and hopefully we can incorporate improvements as we go.
fingers crossed.
Anything else? Okay, thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy and you spent a lot of time on this.
I prioritize this all summer long.
Yeah.
And I will continue to do this. Don't ever worry about my schedule. If you call a water meeting, I'll probably show up. So.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, next on the agenda is public comment. Did we have anybody who wished to?
Go ahead.
Okay, did we have, Wes, is there anybody who signed up for public comment?
Just Mr. Williams.
Okay, John. Welcome, John. As always, glad to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's always good to come before this committee, this board, and give you a BPA update, Mr. Chairman, board members, Director Weaver. My name is John Williams. I'm with the Bonneville Power Administration, and I would just like to give you a brief BPA update. Sustained financial strength boosted by healthy monetary reserves and cost discipline allowed the Bonneville Power Administration to meet all of its financial commitments in fiscal year 2024, despite volatile market and weather conditions. The latest annual report, Powering a Clean Energy Future, captures many of BPA's financial and operational successes in the face of challenging conditions. If anyone would like a copy of that annual report, just contact me and I will send you a link. If you would like a hard copy, I can also obtain one and send it to you. The federal hydropower system prevailed against extreme weather fiscal year 2024, water conditions in the Columbia River Basin were below average, coming in at 77% of normal. But the federal dams and Columbia Generating Station nuclear plant consistently delivered, keeping the lights on and even through the most extreme events. Quick pause. I'm happy for our current weather system that's bringing in the storms in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. I hope it continues, and I hope that it gets us above normal water conditions so that we all can have the type of water year that we would love to always see in our region. In January of this year, a 4-day cold snap set the tone for the rest of Bonneville's fiscal year, with electricity demand and BPA service area reaching record highs, exceeding the output of the federal Columbia River power system. BPA turned to power markets to fill the gap. That means we went in the market and really bought very expensive power to the tune of costing us $300 million. On the other hand, financial stability let Bonneville observe that loss, preventing the need for increased power rates. The agency also ended the year with substantial financial reserves and strong investment-grade credit ratings. Among its other successes, BP established a framework for new long-term power contracts. As you may recall, that's our provider of choice. So we've been able to reach agreement on that. We reach agreement in principle in modernizing the Columbia River Treaty that we've talked about, and strengthen partnerships for fish and wildlife while preserving hydropower flexibility. Notably, BPA also advanced critical transmission initiatives to expand the grid in support of load growth and renewable resource integration. This included deploying about $665 million toward capital projects, an increase of $232 million over the prior year. CEO Administrator John Hairston said, "Everything we have accomplished this year supports our vision for economic prosperity and environmental sustainability, while overcoming challenges to enable the Northwest clean energy future. Bonneville remains committed to being a reliable business partner that our customers can count on to meet their evolving needs, and a trustworthy steward that the region can count on to provide vital power and transmission resources." Last but not least, I know that some of you are saying, well, what about fish returns? It is clearly an area of progress for Bonneville Power Administration efforts to mitigate the impacts of the federal dams on salmon and steelhead, and broader federal efforts to increase their abundance. Independent scientists who review federal fish recovery actions recently stated we might be closer to returning 5 million salmon and steelhead to the Columbia and Snake Rivers by 2025. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my brief update on the Bonneville Power Administration.
Okay, thank you, John. Does anybody have any questions for John? Very good, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is a financial report. Is that Neely?
Yes, it is.
Good morning, Neely.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Let me go ahead and share this. Here it goes. There we go. Mr. Chairman, as of August 31st, 2024, the board's available and committed balances are as follows. In the secondary aquifer fund, the board has a cash balance of roughly 37.2 million, a committed balance of approximately 35 million, and an uncommitted balance of roughly 2.1 million. In the board's revolving development account, you have a cash balance of approximately 36.3 million, a committed balance of roughly 29.7 million, a loan principal outstanding of approximately 15.7 million, and an uncommitted balance of approximately 6.5 million. In the water management account, you have a cash balance of approximately 319.6 million, with total obligated funds of roughly 312.6 million, and then an unobligated balance of roughly 6.9 million. Taking those three board accounts together, the board has a total committed, earmarked, obligated, but not dispersed balance of roughly $377,524,748, a total loan principal outstanding of $15,660,631, and then a total uncommitted, unobligated balance of $15,550,330. Then moving to the ARPA section of my memo, you can see the three appropriations we've received to date from 2022, 2023, and 2024. That is a total received to date of 200 million. And you can see that asterisk there, that the department anticipates the receipt of 50 million for FY 2026 on or shortly after July 1, 2025. And then there's a total obligated of 250 of that ARPA funds, as you're aware, through your spending plan. Roughly 97 million has been expended, and then 152 million is a committed balance. I have a few notes here. I just wanted to highlight the obligated and unobligated balances in the water management account include funding from these appropriations. And they're listed here again through 2020, all the way up through 2025. And then this last bullet here is board funding actions that have occurred in September and October, because the balance sheets are as of October 31st. We did want to include some additional information so you can make decisions about committing funds today. I'm not going to go through these all explicitly, but you can see that they're grouped by fund, and talks about what was authorized during those months, what those resolution numbers are, and what impact it has to that balance that you see on the previous, at the top of the page in my memo. And then we've done that for ARPA as well. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Okay, board members, any questions for Neely? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Priest Lake Dam litigation.
Yes, Megan Carter will talk about that item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good morning, Megan.
Good morning. So the Priest Lake litigation is moving forward. There are many activities going on since trial is scheduled for February, which is why I am now before you asking you to approve further funds for outside counsel. You do have a resolution in front of you. It did not have an amount put in it. We were waiting for an estimate from outside counsel. On the high end, they estimate through trial another $570,000 for the Strider litigation. There is some remaining in the budget that you've already approved, and that should cover the amount needed for the travelers litigation that's also involved with that. That funding has been going at about $9,000 per month in comparison to much more with the Strider litigation.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Yeah.
The summary judgment motions that are pending
granted, you still would have to have a trial anyway, right?
There would still be some trial, items. The boards only had a partial motion for summary judgment on it.
But it would dispose of the Strider claim.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Megan, is the same legal team handling travelers too?
Yes.
So short of writing you a blank check, right, do you have a recommendation of what we need to authorize at this time?
I do recommend, authorizing, 570,000.
Okay. Board members, any questions on that amount?
Money.
Yeah,
Chairman, I would move that we authorize an additional $570,000 in attorney's fees and consultant fees for the main deal. We're there, we can walk away.
so that is a motion to adopt the resolution.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, just point out it's an up to number, right? Yeah.
It is.
Okay. All right, I think we need a roll call vote on this. If there's no further discussion, Jennifer, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen,
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Mr. McMahon,
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead,
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone,
Aye.
and Chairman Raybould.
Aye, motion carries. Okay. Next up, Mr. Patton, Mountain Home Air Force Base Water Resilience Project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mike Morrison will lead off, I believe, with a brief update on the project, and then Megan Carter will be back to talk about the proposed water use agreement with the Air Force.
Okay, welcome, Mike. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Weaver, Mr. Patton. Good to be here today. I have a very, very quick update on the status of the Mountain Home Air Force Base project. It is still on time and under budget, so I thought you might want to know that. If you go out there, let's see, I think they're wrapping up the last bit of work on the 14.4 mile pipeline between CJ Strike Reservoir and the base. If you go out there today, I think they're going to be wrapping up the last trenchless crossing there on CJ Strike Road. They're doing some seeding, some other things in order to prepare the soil that they disturbed when they were putting the pipeline in. But that portion of it is pretty well done. And they're just working on the in-canyon work, and that is on time. And it looks like the birds have been very cooperative. So we haven't had to work around much the way of birds. We had one little kestrel that came along. I understand we had to give him a 75-meter exclusion zone or something like that. But anyway, for the most part, things have been going very well in the canyon. Couple of other odds and ends. We got an omnibus gift package that we're working on. That is the thing that's going to allow us to give this to the Air Force. So currently, most of the documents or I think everything that the Air Force needs from us, we've given them. Then they're under review at the Air Force. Then the other thing I had up here was water use agreement, but I'm going to pass that back on over to Ms. Carter. So where do we go?
Thanks, Mike. Sounds like everything's going well. Appreciate your efforts. Megan.
I am here today to discuss the water use agreement with the Air Force. This agreement outlines the means for the board to provide water rights to the base for their continued use. You have a copy of that draft agreement in your materials. And I'm just going to quickly walk through some of the key portions of this. There's the water supply bank rental agreement. That agreement is with the water supply bank. The board has leased in the water rights that it obtained from Simplot That lease is going to be for 50 years, and then they will rent out water to themselves for the use of the Mountain Home Air Force Base. That amount is estimated to be 1,875 acre feet of water available during the irrigation season for Mountain Home Air Force Base's use. That is an up to amount. And also estimated, the department has not finalized that number through the water supply bank yet. And the Air Force may elect every 5 years to adjust that amount up to that 1875. If they elect a lesser amount, the board has the option of using that water for other purposes. That rental, the base will be paying for at the rate as it currently is every year. It's an annual payment paid on December 1st every year. In addition, there is the wintertime water rate that the board has applied for and is going through the process before the department. That covers the period not covered through the irrigation season. And that rate is lumped in payment wise with the water supply bank rental. So it's just one payment for all of it. In conjunction with that, to resolve some of the protests and other concerns with that wintertime rate, the Mountain Home Air Force Base has agreed that its groundwater rights will be supplemental to the surface water rights and can be only exercised in certain circumstances. As I mentioned before, it's a 50-year term. And then one of the other big things to mention is that it does cover default and remedies. The board will only be in default if it does not provide access to either the water rights in the water supply bank or the wintertime right. It will not be in default if water is unavailable under those rights pursuant to the prior appropriation doctrine. Those are the big terms. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Megan? Okay.
So you do have a resolution before you to approve signing this agreement. It is not completely final, but these are the substantial terms. And if something changes, we'll bring it back. But if not, we would like your permission to have the chairman sign this agreement so it can go into effect on January 1st.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we go ahead and approve this water right use agreement with Mountain Home Air Force Base and have the chairman sign the document.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion or the resolution? Jennifer, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen. Aye. Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Mr. McMahon.
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead, Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone, Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Motion carries, and we are hurrying to get this meeting over so you can begin your travel. Yeah.
Quicker than I go there, but that's okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike and Megan. Okay, agenda item number 9.
Appointment of hearing officer.
Yes.
Megan Carter
Oh.
will also present this one.
All right.
This is the last one. You don't have to
Okay.
see me anymore after this.
Well, that's just fine. Well, I just wondered if we should get you a chair here at the table. Okay.
We've had this discussion before about the Hastings matter with the stream channel alteration violation. back in, what was it, July, the board appointed Pete Wood as hearing officer. He has been disqualified for a perceived conflict of interest. The department has now identified former Justice Burdick as another hearing officer. He's also under contract with the department to act as a hearing officer. We do not see any potential conflicts, so hopefully this is the last time I am before you asking for a new appointment.
Okay, we have a resolution. Anybody have any questions for Megan?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution appointing Justice Burdick as a hearing officer.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Voice vote?
Yeah, voice vote.
Okay, there being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next, Anderson Ranch. Thank you, Megan. Anderson Ranch dam raise.
Brian Horsborough with Reclamation will give that update.
Morning, Brian.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Weaver. Appreciate the opportunity to brief you today. As always, I'm joined today by Chris Keith, who is our Senior Project Management on the dam raise project in the back of the room here. Before I provide my update today, I'd like to inform you of a recent selection that we made over at Reclamation. I've selected a gentleman named Ryan Alcorn as the new Snake River Deputy Area Manager. This is the position that I previously held before I moved into my current area manager role. Ryan has 24 years of federal service, so he's quite experienced and brings a wealth of knowledge in water resource planning. And then he will assume a prevalent role on the Reclamation Anderson Ranch dam raise team. Most notably, he'll serve as the new project sponsor on the RIM projects, which is the role that I previously played. So for today, my update, I'd like to focus on continued design work and the reinitiation of NEPA, all to highlight the great work and coordination since we last updated you. At the last update, we reported achievement of the 60% design, which occurred in May of this year. And then we are now we're now close to achieving the 90% design, which we expect to complete in early 2025. Then the 90% design drawings and specifications will also be accompanied by an updated construction cost estimate and updated overall total project cost estimate. So admittedly, we are taking a little longer than we had anticipated in the final designs. We were planning to have 100% designs by spring of 2025, and that's now being pushed out to the summer of 2025. And we've talked about some of the complexities that we've come across as we've gone through the dam raise. And so that push out is as a result of those complexities that we're unearthing as we move through some of our design studies. The team is also focused on updating the technical write-up portions of the supplemental draft EIS. These technical write-ups are essential to the reinitiation of NEPA, which will start in a couple of weeks. And we anticipate publishing the supplemental draft EIS in the summer of 2025. So now I'll take a deeper dive into some of the details and achievements associated with those projects. As I believe you know, we have completed the updated analysis for the potential water supply mitigation that may be required during the construction timeframe. And because of some of the design improvements that we've made, we have greatly reduced the estimated amount of water that may be needed as compared to what we determined in the feasibility. So that's good news. The reduced volume sets the project up to be less impactful to the existing space holders during construction, and also lowers the total estimated project cost. Along with that analysis, our water operations team has also completed a reservoir operations rule curve for the proposed construction timeframe. And that rule curve essentially will dictate how the reservoir will be operated according to that new rule curve during the construction timeframe. And that was developed in coordination with the Corps of Engineers. So in closing on those two issues, the summary of the necessary mitigation water and reservoir operations during construction are both very important to understanding as we move forward on the SDIS analysis. With respect to the dam raise components, a little more information on that. As I previously mentioned, the design team is working on the 90% designs. We awarded a construction review board, or CRB, task order to have 2 external senior level dam design experts review our designs. And that is a requirement for our Safety of Dams program. And although this isn't a Safety of Dams project in reclamation terms, there are enough similarities and complexities associated with this that we decided to take the extra precaution and use a CRB board to ensure a safe design and adequate design. We also completed the geologic investigation report and drawings, which are critical to the 90% level geotechnical and civil designs. And then lastly, we've completed a required potential hazards material site survey that identifies the types of hazardous material a contractor may encounter during construction. With respect to the rim projects, again, we're working on 90% designs. There's been continual and coordinated discussions with the U.S. Forest Service, which, as a reminder, is the federal agency that manages the federal lands around the reservoir on our behalf. We completed a reclamation U.S. Forest Service concurrence document for how accessibility requirements will be incorporated into the rim design projects. And we've also developed a joint disposal of materials plan that will be implemented during the construction period. And essentially that materials plan defines how existing features will be handled. So fire rings, picnic tables, shelters, etc. So in closing, the next couple of months will be very busy for our project team as they reinitiate NEPA, complete 90% designs, and update the 90% cost estimates. Early 2025 will then be busy for other subject matter experts as we seek external stakeholder input and supplemental draft and comments on the supplemental draft EIS. And then also move towards 90% design reviews. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude and stand for any questions.
Okay, board members, Brian or
Chairman.
Al.
Brian, could you just run through again the timeline again? 90% design, 90% cost estimate, supplemental EIS, and the ESA consultation.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker. 90% designs are expected around the end of December.
Next month. Not next year.
Oh, I'm sorry, completed in early 2025 for 90% designs. 100% designs in the spring of 2025.
Spring or summer? Spring?
100% designs in the spring of 2025, now being pushed to summer of 2025.
Yeah.
And then what was the other question, Mr.
The
Barker?
cost estimate, the SEIS, and the ESA.
Current total project cost estimate is estimated at 127 million.
No, I'm sorry. You were saying you were almost ready. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, but you were saying you had a 90% cost estimate that was coming, and I just wanted to know when that was coming.
So the 90% cost estimate will come in concurrence with completion of the 90% design.
Got it. And then your NEPA expectation when the supplemental EIS is done?
Chris, do you remember that number off the top of your head, that figure?
Summer of 20.
Summer of 25,
For publishing.
publishing the SDIS? Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay. And then is there a timeline for starting the ESA consultation?
I don't have that figure with me. That will be determined as we initiate the new NEPA in about 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? So when will the record of decision be issued then? Will that be the summer of 25?
Chris, do you have that date? 2026?
That's getting pushed off to 26.
Yeah, by the time yes, 2026, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay, anything else? All right, we're still moving. Maybe at
Absolutely.
a different velocity than we'd anticipated, but we're still moving in the right direction.
Yep. The project is moving along quite nicely. And again, Mr. Chairman, the delays we've occurred probably not to be expected for a design of this magnitude.
Okay,
So if I could follow.
yes.
If we get the rod in early 2026, would we be able to start construction in 2026? Chris?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, it would probably, notice to proceed probably would push out to early 27.
So we could potentially do some work on the rim projects in 27, but construction on the dam itself wouldn't start till the fall of 27 under this new timeline. If you want to come up here and
How about Bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so the government is developing an estimated construction schedule, but it is a government estimate. And so we are not going to dictate fully the contractor's means and methods and how they would go about their sequencing. So if we were able to award earlier than fall of 27, and the contractor was to choose to go out and do other work besides the spillway work is what's tied to a fall timeframe based on our reservoir operations rule curve.
okay. So if I guess I'm confused because I thought at one point we were going to issue the rod in 25 and potentially put this thing out to bid in the summer of 25. So, but there has to be a year lag between when the rod is issued and when we actually put this project out for bid.
Go ahead. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, so the lag comes in our acquisitions process. And so having the record of decision is what allows us to wrap up our solicitation package and be able to actually issue our solicitation. We cannot do that prior to a record of decision. So that's where we get a lag when actual construction would be able to start.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Anything else? All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate you. You're great partners. I think we'll get there. Or somebody sitting here will get there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Next up, Conservation Infrastructure and Efficiency Fund.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Neely Miller will talk about that. He has a resolution for your consideration.
Thanks.
Just a minute while I pulled up the materials here. You have it? Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You'll recall yesterday you received an update on the Big Wood River Groundwater Management Area Management Plan, as well as the advisory committee's letter to the director with recommendations for a 3-year extension. Part of that was related to the SEEF fund. And yesterday I presented a resolution for you to reauthorize the SEEF fund for another 3 years. It would be for fiscal year 2026, fiscal year 2027, and fiscal year 2028. And so I would stand for your consideration of this resolution and stand for any questions.
Okay, we have a resolution before us. Do you have any questions for Neely?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, Neil,
Yeah.
what's we want they want $200,000 annually out of the secondary aquifer fund for starting in 26?
Fiscal year 2026.
Okay. And this says dollar for dollar for match. So did we put the language in here that we're not matching the purchase of rental water that the SEEF is responsible for under the new agreement?
Mr. Barker, I think we determined that we didn't need to do that yesterday.
Okay.
I think this resolution is clear that the money is to match that last whereas conservation, infrastructure, and efficiency projects.
Okay.
If you want to change that,
No, I'm fine, if that's the intent of the contract or the resolution.
And I would confirm it is a 1-to-1 match.
okay?
Mr. Chairman, I
Brian.
move we approve this resolution to commit to the seed funds.
I'll
Up to
second.
the 200,000.
Okay, all right, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt this resolution funding SEAF. No further discussion, we will proceed to vote. Roll call vote, please, Jennifer.
Mr. Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen,
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Mr. McMahon,
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead,
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone,
Aye.
and Chairman Raybould.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, ESPA telemetry grant, does Neely get to stay there?
Yes, he does, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Neely, what can you tell us about that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Justin couldn't be here today, and you recall he has presented this to the Finance Committee previously, so I'm going to be presenting this today and presenting the resolution. As I mentioned, the criteria was presented to the Finance Committee and it received a favorable recommendation to the full board. Again, this is regarding a $2 million award to the board from the Bureau of Reclamation to strengthen efforts for drought resilience in the Eastern Snake Plain. The funding comes through the Investing in America Inflation Reduction Act and is intended to provide real-time information for both surface water and groundwater diversions, enabling more effective and efficient management of limited water supplies during periods of drought. And that criteria is attached to the resolution that is attached to this memo. The criteria indicates that applications would be due the last Friday of March and would be evaluated based upon that criteria that has been discussed by the Finance Committee. Once those applications are evaluated, they would be presented to a Finance Committee for a funding recommendation and then brought to the full board for funding. And with that, I would stand by for any questions and let you consider the resolution for you.
Okay, board members, any questions for Neely on this resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we adopt the criteria in this resolution.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Probably should.
Yeah. Okay, let's do a roll call vote on this.
Mr.
Jennifer.
Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen,
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Mr. McMahon,
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead,
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone,
Aye.
Chairman Raybould.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, Mountain Home Plateau Aquifer Model.
Amy Steinke will discuss this briefly, and then she has a resolution for your consideration this morning.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Resolution.
Yeah. You could.
I can.
Okay, thank you. So as you will recall, yesterday I presented on the Mountain Home project and a path forward to develop a Western Snake Plain model. So the resolution that will be in front of you momentarily is seeking funding for the construction and development of the Western Snake Plain model, which will extend the model domain of the current Treasure Valley model across the Mountain Home Plateau to King Hill. And this will also allow for multiple refinement areas. The work is slated to be completed by the USGS over calendar years 2025 to 2028 at a total cost of $1.15 million, with the board contributing $850,000 and the USGS contributing $300,000. In the board's secondary aquifer fund for fiscal year 2025, the board allocated $250,000 for model construction on the plateau, but required an additional resolution approved for the funds to be utilized. So this resolution authorizes $250,000 from the secondary aquifer fund for this fiscal year to begin model construction and commits the board to funding the remaining $600,000 over the next 3 fiscal years. If you have any questions, I will stand for those now. Thank you.
Okay, board members, anyone have any questions about this? Okay, entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
Move to adopt this resolution.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, we'll proceed to vote. Jennifer, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen. Aye. Mr. Gibbs.
Aye.
Mr. McMahon.
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone.
Aye.
And Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer Manny's Recharge. There's our. Good morning, Wesley.
Good morning, sir. Excuse me, as I seem to have a slight, here we go. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, good. Want to make sure it went to the right one. So this will be very quick as far as an update on the board's recharge program. Fine. And so currently we started the natural flow recharge on October 22nd, and we've currently put in a little over 33,000 acre feet. The systems, and this shows where we've been doing it. So Twin Falls and Southwest Irrigation District, kind of standard ones. And this year it's American Falls Reservoir District number 2 off the Miller-Gooding Canal. And this gives an idea of where the recharge is going. Currently the system's been really steady. There was a little bump right at the start as they're adjusting the system, but that has since smoothed out and we're running pretty flat at this point in time, around 400, a little over 400 CFS. One interesting thing that we've noticed so far is the return flows and the reach gains from Minidoka to the Milner Pool are actually running lower this year, and we're not quite for sure why. Because with what they're normally releasing, we would expect at this point in time, right around 70 CFS, and it looks like we're getting around 40 CFS. And then, so that covers the natural flow. As far as the storage, it was very light this year. All that we have that has been donated to us from storage water as part of a surface water coalition agreement is from the cities. And that was a total of 52,000, a little over 52,000 acre feet. Pretty much all of that's gone into Progressive Irrigation District.
It's more like 5,200. I think the cities would be alarmed if they thought they were donating 52,000.
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. As my staff knows, I have a really problem with zeros, and being a technical person, it's amazing the problems that causes. I add them, I take them away. Yes, 5,200. Sign. Anyway, basically we have about a little over 300 to put in, and we're getting that in place so we can get that in before the deadline of November 30th, which is rapidly approaching. That gives you an idea of what that's looked like. And with that, that's a very quick update on our recharge program. I would stand for any questions.
Okay, board members, any questions for Wesley? Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be for Wesley or for you, but the stipulated agreement that's being signed, was there an increase in the recharge allocation, or I kept hearing that there was going to be, what's the final word on our expected recharge going forward?
Both sides have agreed to support the water board in seeking to increase our average annual recharge number from 250,000 to 350,000.
That was my understanding. I just want to make sure that's what ended up. Thank you.
So we're going to begin the process to do that shortly after the first of the year.
I think one thing I would add to that, with my understanding of the new agreement, in the past, the Surface Water Coalition agreements we've recharged in between 60 to 70,000 acre feet of storage water when it wasn't used. Moving forward, that's probably not going to be the case, and will probably be limited to what the cities do. So it'll be around that 5,000 acre feet moving forward.
That's correct, Wes.
Okay.
The groundwater districts will only provide the needed amount of water, and any additional water that they secure will roll over for the following year. Okay, anything else? Okay, thanks, Wes.
I'm staying up.
Oh,
I've got one more
oh,
thing.
yes, you do. You have an A and a B. I'm sorry.
That
Okay.
is not a problem, Mr. Chairman. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is standards and procedures for the board's managed recharge program in the ESPA. These were presented to the Aquifer Stabilization Committee, and the intent of them is to provide transparency to our partners and the public, and provide a kind of a statutory framework for the program. And also it provides criteria for conducting the board's recharge, kind of what of our basic standards are, and also conveyance and delivery expectations and monitoring standards. Now, these were presented to the Aquifer Stabilization Committee, and it's also in your board materials, and you'll notice it is a fairly substantial document. And at the time, the committee wanted a little more time to look at it, and also to give a chance for everyone else to, the rest of the board members to also review it. And I'm going to bring those up. And so in the materials, to start with, you have a resolution that basically would adopt the standards and procedures. And then it goes right into the standards and procedures, which I will make it a little bit bigger on the screen for people, mainly me. One of the advantages of getting older is I like things in a little bigger font. So at this stage, like I said, it's a fairly hefty document. I would basically open up to the members of the board, and if they have any comments or suggestions for this, staff is definitely open to that. This was kind of our first shot to cover as much as we can to provide this basic framework, but we are definitely open to any comments or suggestions that the board would have.
Okay, any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I've been through the draft and I have a number of questions and suggestions. If I could just walk you through it, and maybe that would be easier than trying to do it piecemeal, or I can do this offline with Wes, whatever you think.
Wait, 5-10 minutes?
Yeah.
Let's just do it. And everybody will be aware before we vote on it.
Okay, so Wes, if you turn to section 4, Roman numeral, or section Roman numeral 4, part 1.
What's the page number, sir?
5.
Okay.
Page number
5.
Okay.
So 1C says that the contractor will notify the board within 24 hours after they stop delivery. So why don't we want prior notice?
What we found, and so we could put that, and the reason we worded it this way is what we've seen in the past, especially the lower valley is pretty steady, and usually they know pretty much what's going on. Upper valley, there's a lot more variability in it. And even there's situations that can occur that they don't necessarily have prior notice that they have to shut down. And so that was the reason that we put it that way. However, as I said before, I'm completely open.
So does it make any difference whether or not we get notice or not? if, as long as we know how much water went into the recharge site?
Yes, it does, matter, because especially in some cases when we're trying to figure out how much, we have a limited rate that we're trying to disperse. And so we want to know if someone's turned off, so then we can divert that to another area.
Which seems to suggest to me we'd like to know in advance, if possible.
And that would be, I'm completely fine with changing that, sir.
Al, I think the complication with that is most of our providers are utilizing their irrigation delivery facilities to deliver recharge water. And if demand changes, and they need to reduce how much recharge water they're delivering, say to an off canal site, that probably, we want to maximize how much recharge we're getting. If we required them to notify in advance, I think we would lose opportunity. Within 24 hours, I think that's reasonable. I guess I don't see a problem with that, but there's some ebbs and flows in how this water is being wheeled to the off canal sites.
It's a very dynamic system. Dean?
No, I think it's one of those points I know in the past when we have, in the spring, you get a rain event and all of a sudden the water right comes back on. Everybody shuts off, the water right comes back on, and have the ability to do it. I think that I'm okay with going where we're at on the deal with in 24 hours, but that I know that deal up there, particularly the upper valley, moves hour by hour almost, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. One overall point, this is just a personal fingernail on the blackboard. We can stop using acronyms and actually call it manage aquifer recharge. That would be better than another acronym, but it's just a personal preference. It doesn't really change anything. In section Roman numeral 5, site metrics, so on the next page, page down to that, you've got certain water levels where we want to start at 30 feet, and then we want to make sure that there's at least 15 feet. What's the hydrologic reason for those elevations?
The reason for those elevations, and it's with my work in Arizona, one of the things that we came up with is we definitely, one of the concerns was sub structures such as basements or leach fields from septics, and we wanted to make sure we didn't want to impact that. So be quite honest, the 30 feet is somewhat arbitrary. It was looking at what's the minimum, how do I want to word this? What's the highest water level that we think will give us enough room to do recharge, depending on the volume that we're doing, and be able to do that without impacting any other subsurface structures. That's where the 30 feet came from. The 15 is the hard limit of like, okay, we do not want anything we're doing coming up above that level because of the things that I mentioned. One thing I'd add is, to a certain degree, that will be a case-by-case basis. Where we're recharging and what we know right now, I think 15 foot is a good cutoff. If perchance we develop in more urban areas where you have much deeper substructures, then we'd have to relook at that. Throughout the ESPA right now, I think 15 foot is probably a good cutoff.
Because there's not any structures below 15 feet anywhere where we're doing.
Not that I know of.
I guess my question is, are these numbers enough? Should they be higher? because of the potential for impact to other structures, to flooding, to, you know, putting water in drains that would otherwise not be in the drains and cause flooding in other places. Is that enough of a cushion? And, you know, I'm not a hydrologist, so I just want to make sure we don't get ourselves into a situation of causing damage to other people.
Understand, and that is definitely a concern. As far as the drains, yes, I think the 15-foot is enough that we don't have to worry about that. It really comes down to what we're dealing with in the areas that we're recharging is like your basements and potentially septic fields. And with that, I think 15-foot is an adequate limit. Part of the reason that we even moved it up that high is there's some areas where the water table can fluctuate greatly and where it can kind of start bumping up to that 30-foot zone. This would still give us the opportunity to use those sites. And as of right now, I don't know of any structures that it would damage if we brought that up to 15.
Okay. Okay, and then in the next section, we got minimum infiltration rates. How were those derived?
Again, there's a little bit of arbitrariness to this. Where we came up with these is one of the things that we've noticed that with the recharge that we've done over the past 10 years is where this really comes in is figuring out what that minimum rate is that makes it economical for the board to do. Because there's some sites where we've recharged in the past where they only do 5, 7 CFS. One, that takes a lot of staff time to get the conveyance contract in place and to manage the contract. And then there's some sites, if it's an off canal site that only does 7 CFS, that means we also have to pay for the water quality monitoring that's in place. And so we're trying to limit it to something that's really going to be worthwhile and have an impact on the aquifer.
So would these change any of our existing agreements? Everybody meets the ones we're doing now, everybody meets these requirements?
Yes. All of our sites meet this requirement. There have been some private sites that have been done in the past that we've used that it would exclude those moving forward. And my personal opinion is that's not necessarily a bad thing.
And so if something we're doing, we talked at one of the previous board meetings about using injection wells. Does this 10 CFS apply to each injection well?
No, that would, what the intent is to have that apply to the complex. And I think to a certain degree, that's why as far as B, it's either 10 CFS per day or 600 acre feet per month. That's to help kind of capture those, like with the injection wells, that the individual well might not do that, but as long as the complex does, then we're okay. That's the thinking anyhow.
Okay. The location requirements, these 15% of 5-year volumetric changes and the travel time of at least 4 months. Is this different than what we've been doing in the past in terms of evaluating, or is this basically what we've already previously adopted as a practice?
It is. So, far as the history goes, is what we have in our previous resolutions is the 15% of the 5-year retention time. And as we moved along, what has become equally as important isn't necessarily the retention time, but how quick does it return to the aquifer? And so this will kind of codify that we're putting that aspect in. To answer your question, far as practice, this has been what we've been doing in practice, but this just kind of codifies it to make sure that water's getting put in that's actually gonna be used. And not just, we're not gonna pay for a recharge that then instantly goes back to the river before the gates on the reservoirs drop down and just flows out.
So the 50% travel time is not to the aquifer, but to the Snake River, right?
It's to any reach gain, yes, to the Snake River in particular, yes.
Okay, Dean had a question.
I just had a comment, and some of this goes to what we're talking about here. This has become one of our topics we talked about with our SWC agreement. You know, they want to see more of it at the reach when they need it. Yeah, some of the places, you know, that we've been recharging can have, 75% of the water still there in 5 years. So that's one of the reasons we did that. I mean, there's places, I think this is a good number because you swim places like the Hilton Spill, and just some of this just slides right back into the reservoir.
Right.
So this is trying to thread the needle that the SWC would like more of it coming in at that reach in a shorter time, so.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Al.
Yeah, please do.
Before we move on the B, section 2, letter B, I think we took most of these out, but the 10 CFS per day should just be 10 CFS because that's.
I apologize, we missed that one. I so apologize. You are absolutely correct, sir. We will make that change.
Okay.
So those are the technical questions. I had a couple of others on section 6.1 conveyance systems. We're requiring the entities to have insurance. Are we additional insurance on their policy?
In some cases, at least what's happened in the past, yes. And at least with the entities we work with so far, that's not been a problem. In some instances, it's covered on their existing policy. There have been a couple times when they've had to add something, but it's not been an economical consideration of doing that. It's been very slight.
Easy to do, and it provides protection for the board. And I suggest that we try to require, or that we do require, that they make us additional insurance. In case anybody wants to sue them, we're covered.
Okay.
And then F, at the bottom of this page, there's a discussion about using the natural stream channels.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember at one point we said, no, we're not going to approve that. And so why are we now saying we're going to use natural stream channels as recharge sites?
Where it comes into place is a couple areas. One is in the lower valley, there's times when they're releasing from Magic Valley that they wouldn't be releasing down the main channel of the Big Wood River. It's basically dry pretty much all the time. And so during those times, there's an opportunity that we can run the water down the Little Wood, back through the Miller-Gooding Canal, and actually put the water back into the channel. And so we're adding water that wouldn't have recharged there anyway. So it gives opportunity.
That request was made, the board denied it.
I'm not for sure anytime there's water flowing in the channel, any water, then absolutely not. We do not do that. The other place where we come that it gets to be a potential issue is in the upper valley. And there's discussion with some of the entities of whether it's their canal or whether it's a stream channel. And so that's why, just to thread that needle, is why we put that in here. The specific case you're talking about, I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head what the situation was there.
I think it was Big Wood Channel Big Wood River was flowing, and they wanted to put water from the Milner-Gooding into the Big Wood River channel.
That was the case.
So they wanted to release big magic water.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Into the natural channel. I don't remember if it was flowing or not.
Right, but they would have done that anyway.
They would have done it anyway.
Right.
And because they had to spill it, because they didn't have room for it, and they wanted us to pay for them to spill water that they were going to spill anyway. And so we don't want to have to be in a situation where we pay for those kinds of circumstances.
That's correct, but I think what Wesley's asking for is maybe consideration on a case-by-case basis with new water added to the system.
Okay, and this doesn't require that to come to the board. It just says the staff can do it. And
Would you like that to come before the board?
I would. I do think that's appropriate. Consider that. Because we have to approve the site anyway, right? Don't we?
Well, so this isn't,
Well, we approve construction of off canal sites that we fund. But I don't think we don't approve in canal recharge.
Well, we have
As
a
a board.
contract with these people.
Yeah, that's true.
Can now recharge. So when we approve a contract, wouldn't we want that part of the discussion?
But we would still have to approve the conveyance contract for AFRD two to convey it to the Big River Channel. Wouldn't we, Wes?
yes, yes, we would. Now, partly the issue is here. Again, this doesn't come up often. And that's why we put in here that,
Well,
after consultation and approval by program staff. Again, when these situations arise, I don't know if we have time to come back to the board to get approval to do something.
well,
It would make
right
operations
now,
tricky.
Wes, there's only, as I understand it, there's only two exceptions. One is if the Big Wood River Channel is dry, and there's an opportunity to take water from the Little Wood over and put in the Big Wood Channel for the purposes of recharge.
I don't think you can do it that way.
Yeah.
Where?
If you take it out of the Little Wood, put it in the canal, the Milner Gooding Canal, and then there's a
Through the Miller Gooding.
okay, so that's one. And then the other one is whether or not the Great Feeder Canal is a canal or a natural channel.
And there's also the whole Sand Creek, Willow Creek thing.
Whose canal is that?
Whose canal or is it natural stream flow?
It's a natural stream that they fight over.
So anyway, but in the case of the Sand Creek thing, we don't worry so much about, we're not counting conveyance losses in Sand Creek, are we? It wasn't that a matter of wheeling water through the Sand Creek, which may or may not be a natural channel or a canal, and getting it to the point of diversion to take it to an off canal recharge site?
It could come into a place where where Progressive wants to use Sand Creek.
Okay, so now we're up to three.
Right.
Why don't we have staff bring these three exceptions to the board and let the board approve those exceptions? And if other exceptions come up, it sounds like the board would be happier making that determination. And frankly, that takes it off your plate, and nobody will come back and say, well, why did you let them do that?
Come in and get a pre-approval.
Yeah.
With certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Must be pre-approved
Yeah.
by the board.
I don't think this is the kind of thing that you're gonna field a phone call on every other day.
Right.
Not if we,
I don't remember it coming up very much in the past.
Yeah, and I think we want to err on the side of caution. I don't think we want to double dip on what potentially is managed recharge and what otherwise would just be incidental.
and that's exactly where staff has been coming from, of how we choose. If it was something that was gonna happen anyhow, then we don't allow it. It's just, if it would add new water, then we gave it a thumbs up. But if you want the specific cases to come back before the board, that is not a problem.
I don't think it's a huge problem, and it alleviate staff of taking on the responsibility of making that call, which may eventually be elevated to the board anyway.
Absolutely not a problem.
Okay, all right.
So last comment, page 8. You have monitoring of IDWR recharge water quantity in 1A, and it refers to water Water quantity monitoring program. Okay, I thought that said quality. Never mind. We have a water quality section. Okay, that was it. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, with those changes that you've accepted and we've discussed, Pat,
Mr. Chairman, I'm just concerned that the document is headed the ESPA managed aquifer recharge, and all of a sudden the wood is tiptoeing in. I understand the recharge from the AFRD two. I just wonder if we're extending the reach of this document farther than it says.
Dean.
Mr. Chairman, I make a comment on that. So we are tiptoeing a little bit into big wood, but I think every recharge in the past, anything from Magic Dam below has always been considered ESPA recharge. Am I right about that? I mean, that's considered ESPA. I don't think we've tiptoed over Timmerman Hill yet, have we, on these?
No.
I don't think we really have these sites. So everything, it's always been considered in the past that anything past Magic, whether it comes off the Ridgefield Canal or whatever else, it's always been ESPA recharge.
My concern is I believe that there's a recharge application that is above Timmerman. And
the Sun Valley.
It's Hiawatha Canal.
Oh.
And I'm concerned that this is gonna fall into this ESPA.
you got some info on that?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Pat, so these would apply to the board's recharge activities, would not apply to any other parties.
Thank you.
Okay, does that solve that problem?
Yes.
Okay, anything else? Okay, are we just adopting these by motion or do we have a resolution?
There's a resolution at the very start of this, yes.
Oh, that's right. I forget.
It's a lot of stuff.
Okay, we have a resolution before us with the attachment and with the corrections made to the attachment. I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
I saw the.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I think it talks a little bit about a fee.
It costs money.
Yeah, I think we'll have a roll call vote on this, if you would please, Jennifer.
Mr. Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen,
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Mr. McMahon,
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead,
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone,
Aye.
and Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay,
Thank you very much. That's all for me.
who's gonna talk to us about the cloud seeding program?
I believe Kayla's on Zoom.
Kayla?
Yes, I am here, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there, we can hear you well.
Okay.
Did you sleep okay last night?
Well, we're making progress. Thank you for asking, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. We're cycling through the family right now.
Okay.
I am gonna share my screen. Are you able to see those materials okay, Mr. Chairman?
There we go. Okay, we got it now.
Okay, sorry, I'll make those a little bit bigger. Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. For those of you joining in the public, my name is Kayla Golden. I am the Water Resource Board's Cloud Seeding Program Manager. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be brief today. I know you all are trying to get on the road, so I do have actually 2 resolutions for you, not 3. I've combined the water user and the funding increase into 1 resolution. So I'll walk you through these 2 and explain what I'm asking for your approval for. So the High Country RC&D program is the manual generator project, as you're aware, that's in eastern Idaho. Last year was the first year you all had approved funding to support that program. Historically, since the early 1990s, that has been supported 100% by local stakeholders in the basin, including Water District 1 and IGWA. So last year, due to the increase in costs for their program, they didn't quite have enough of those donations to support. So you all did approve about $40,000 last year to support their operations. This year, costs are continuing to rise, and they're expecting their need to be about $60,000 this year to cover their shortages in donations to support operations. So Mr. Chairman, the resolution that I have before you today is to approve $60,000 to support the High Country Resource Conservation and Development operations for this coming up season 24-25. So this funding would allow them to purchase a number of materials up front beginning the season. This is a little bit different from last year. Last year, we required them to go through all of their donations before they could use money from the board. The challenge with that is that they get their donations throughout the season, and it doesn't allow them to purchase or front load the materials that they need at the beginning of the season. So this year they're asking if they can use that funding at the beginning of the season to purchase some of those materials as they wait for local donations to come in, which they still expect will be short to cover a full season if they have good seating opportunity. So again, Mr. Chairman, $60,000. I'm going to scroll straight to the resolution that's in your materials, starting on line 24 for the High Country RC&D. Now, therefore, it be it resolved, the Idaho Water Resource Board authorizes expenditures not to exceed $60,000 from the secondary fund. And again, this is just for their 24-25 operations, with the understanding that we will work with them over the next year to discuss how the board may contribute funding in the long term. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions.
Okay, board members, any questions for Kayla on this resolution? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the resolution.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, we will proceed to a roll call vote. Jennifer?
Mr. Barker?
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen?
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs?
Aye.
Mr. McMahon?
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone?
Aye.
Chairman Raybould?
I'm going to abstain. The chairman of this committee seeking this funding is an employee of Fremont Madison, and I don't want any inference. So motion carries. Okay, next up, Kayla.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the next item I have for you is on the water user funding for this year. As you all are aware, you have opted to keep water user contributions to the collaborative cloud seeding program relatively constant until we can resolve some long-term funding between Idaho Power Company, the board, and the water users. So as we've discussed previously, keeping these cost share amounts the same while the cost of the programs increase will continue to reduce that percentage of overall contribution from the water users. So keeping things consistent this year, that those contributions that they historically pay would be about 12% of the costs in each of those basins. So what we're looking at for this year would be about $218,400 from the Upper Snake. That is Water District 1 and IGWA combined. About $125,000 from the Boise River Basin and about $92,400 from the Wood River Basin. And so then the board's contribution that would offset the 2/3, that would be a total amount of $1.982 million. And so, Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned, there is a third item on the agenda for collaborative program funding, and I've kind of combined these into two. Yesterday, I had mentioned that when we had set the secondary fund budget back in the spring, we had done that with estimated costs for this season from Idaho Power. However, Idaho Power is still operating in April when we get those costs from them for the previous season. And so by the time that they close out the season, do their final budgeting and give us updated estimated costs for this season, that's well into July, which is obviously into our next fiscal year. And so this year, the estimated costs were a little bit higher than they had initially given us in April, not by much, about $176,000 total. So that would be about $116,000 difference to the board for that 2/3 cost share. And so I've baked that increase into this resolution. And that cost from the board is now 1.982 as opposed to 1.8 that we had originally approved in the secondary fund. So again, we went over the budget yesterday. We still have just under $3 million that hasn't been allocated. So plenty of funds in the budget to cover that, no concerns there. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move straight to the resolution and what we're asking you all to approve. And so again, that would be 1.982 from the board and a total of 4,335,800 from the water users. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Board members, any questions for Kayla?
Mr. Chairman, maybe this is a Brian question, but yesterday we heard from Shelley Keene that there was going to be a fairly significant increase in funding for the cloud seeding program from the cities in the wood. So is that money on top of this? Is that part of this and simply reduces the amount of money that Water District 37 is supposed to pay? How does that going to work?
The latter is my understanding, Mr. Barker, but I would, looking to Pat here, maybe he probably knows a little more of the ins and outs of Water District 37 than I do.
I'm not sure that I can answer your question. I believe that the Water District 37 has set aside funds to fund this commitment. I would assume, given that the contribution from the CEF would be in addition to this.
Well, I guess that was my thought, is how it should be, was that there would be, because this was going to be the city's effort to provide mitigation. And if all they're doing is replacing what is already happening by somebody else, that's not new money, that's not new mitigation, it's otherwise happening. And I don't know how you go about adding 20,000 or whatever the number is, 50,000 to the fund for the work that's going on in the wood. So somebody's got to figure out how to make that happen. And maybe this is something that doesn't happen until next year, so we don't have to worry about it this year. But it still seems to be something we need to make sure that we actually get something out of this additional obligation from the cities.
Pat.
In the past year, the RC&D contribution, which predated the CEF funding, was added and put in to meet the number for Water District 37. In other words, I think it was like a $30,000 additional contribution, which resulted in savings to the Water District 37 for that amount. But I think going forward, it is a complete and separate fund to be put it in totality and add on top of it.
Okay, in addition to that, Kayla, and maybe Brian knows, the water users contribution this cycle is 12%. Didn't we start out that the water users were like 17 or 18%?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. About 4 years ago, when we originally had started on this path, it was about 17% of the total cost, but the operations costs have gone up while the contributions have not.
Right. The funding from the water users has been static while costs have increased.
That is correct.
So one of the things that I think we all hoped and continue to hope that we can do is complete the benefits analysis and sit down with the water users and give them a more realistic look at the benefits of the cloud seeding program directly to them and get their contribution to the program adjusted to complement that. So I think that's something that we need to put on our to-do list, is meeting with the water users in the different basins and talking to them about the increased cost of the program and the substantial benefit to them directly and their need to potentially participate at a higher level. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. We need to do that, but I think the wood poses a little different issue because of this idea that the cities and actually also I think the Camas Prairie users have agreed to put additional funds into the water into the cloud seeding program. So does that gain them additional snow that they otherwise would not have gotten, or is it just easing somebody else's financial burden?
The only way they could get more snow is if we expanded the program in the wood. And maybe that's something we need to have a conversation with our partner and see if there's potential to do that now that we have this new funding source.
Well, I think part of Pat, maybe help me here, but I thought part of the thought process in 37 was that they did want to expand some of the sites in the wood and try to get more snow in that basin. So we need to have that conversation somehow and try to figure out, if the goal is to increase cloud seeding in the wood, how are we going to coordinate with Idaho Power? Who's going to run these additional sites that the cities contemplate that we're going to have in the wood?
I believe if we can find a purveyor, we find more clouds.
Boy, have I got a deal for you.
Weren't there some this week?
Okay.
No, I think you're correct, Matt.
Okay, any further discussion?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a resolution before us. Entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? There being none, we'll proceed to vote. Jennifer, if we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Barker?
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen? Aye. Mr. Gibbs?
Aye.
Mr. McMahon?
I'm gonna abstain.
Mr. Olmstead?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone?
Aye.
And Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Okay, Garrick. By the way, Garrick helped out an awful lot on getting us through that negotiation process on the mitigation plan and very much appreciated his help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the board. Good to see you again. We are about, a month and a half out from the start of the legislative session. And my task here today is to update you on legislation that we're hearing some discussion about out there, just to make you aware what might possibly pop up. The good news is my presentation is going to be very short because there hasn't been a lot of discussion. First off, IDWR is not proposing any legislation this upcoming session, so you won't see anything coming from IDWR. There are two pieces of legislation that the Idaho Water Users Association have been working on, kind of long-term, well, one's long-term, one's short-term, in legislative subcommittees. I just wanted to make you aware because they do impact things that I think, some of the things we've talked about previously and some new things. The first piece of legislation that they're working on relates to the domestic exception. Y'all might remember that this domestic exception is what allows people to develop water rights, small domestic water rights, without going through the application and permit process with the department. And in previous meetings, I talked to you about how the water users were exploring the option of removing the domestic exception for subdivisions. That's kind of where we were at the end of the last legislative session. But since then, some new concepts have been floated. And those new concepts are still in development at this particular point in time. So I'd say that they're not quite ready for prime time discussion yet. And I'm not sure if they'll be finalized and in fact presented to the legislature this year. So really what I wanted to do was to let you know that those conversations related to the domestic exception continue on out there, and the Idaho Water Users Association continue to work on that. So you might see something bubble up related to that, and there might be some conversations shortly before and maybe even during the legislative session related to that. I'll keep a close eye on that, and we'll plan to update you guys at the next board meeting with regards to that. The other legislative topic that's being discussed there relates to Chapter 9 of Title 42. Of course, Title 42 is all the water rights, and Chapter 9 is the code section that governs the distribution of water from canals, ditches, and laterals. Now, the bulk of this legislative this section, Chapter 9, was actually put in place in the late 1800s. And you heard me correctly, yes, the late 1800s. And there's been, through much of this sections, not a heck of a lot of updating done over time. And so really from my personal perspective, this section is in desperate need of some cleanup. In fact, we have the water master from Water District 65. You know, he had identified some language in there that is kind of causes confusion. And I think that's kind of how this issue got raised up and started in conversations before the water users. And the conversation really is, do we need to do more with chapter 9 with regards to that chapter and some of the conflicts in other chapters? And so that's really being explored. Now, we're very early on in that process. And so I think it's going to be a long discussion out there about how we get there. So we may or may not see something this legislative session, but just wanted you to make you aware that it was out there in case you hear something about that. So I'll too continue to keep an eye on that piece and update you guys at the next board meeting. The last little piece I wanted to talk to you about that we have heard of legislation lingering out there really relates to IDWR's contested case process. We've heard that we might see legislation coming up this session that makes it so that IDWR doesn't decide its contested cases. You know, this could have a pretty significant impact on state water policy and who's making decisions related to state water policy going forward. So I wanted to just make you aware that that conversation is out there. You might hear some more about it, and we could see legislation related to that going forward. We haven't seen anything yet at this point in time. We just know that there are those conversations out there, and I didn't want you guys to be surprised by that if you hear something related to that. But we'll probably learn more as we get closer to the legislative session. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my update for today. Happy to answer any questions folks might have.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Any questions for Gary? I imagine the next report will be a little more longer.
I think you're right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, all right. Okay, Director Weaver.
Press on.
You're more comfortable sitting down, you can do that, whatever you'd like to do.
Well, no, it's a good question. I'll stick to standing up for this one and think about it in the future. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. A couple of items that I want to speak to you here. Some of them I'd come in prepared to talk to you about, and then some of them are just comments that I'd like to make based on the conversation that occurred yesterday around those presentations, and then perhaps some today. But let's speak first to the recent delivery call settlement agreement that was inked by the groundwater users and the surface water users. I can report that I'm quite happy that the parties have reached this settlement. I think it will make administration on the Eastern Snake Plain certainly less volatile and contentious over the next couple of years. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, you, Brian Patton, Garrick Baxter, and certainly Lieutenant Governor for all the hard work that you've put in over this. I know the many, many days that were spent driving across the state to participate in those meetings with all of the parties and then with individual parties. So I remember back to the time that I was doing that work in 2015 when that agreement was reached at that time. And I know it takes a lot of work and commitment. So thank you for that. I also appreciated, Brian, your comment earlier regarding the pride that you had in that 2015 settlement agreement. And I too had pride in that agreement and thought it was a good agreement. And I think there's been a lot of revisionist history surrounding that agreement here over the last 2 years. But I can't argue with the fact that that had fatal flaws, and it was untenable as a mitigation plan. And the new plan has many components, but I want to highlight 3 that I think speak to the most glaring fatal flaws in that 2015 agreement. And that's the groundwater users now have the ability to average their management activities through the form of a 4-year block allocation of groundwater. And I've been to some west-wide meetings here during the fall and am now aware of similar multi-year groundwater block allocation plans that are being implemented in Kansas and in Nebraska, and at least so far successful there. So I think this idea of the 4-year block allocation incentivizes the groundwater users to do more conservation in those years of abundant water supply. And so I think that it was necessary to have that. I also think it speaks to one of the fatal flaws that had to do with curtailment and the fact that we curtailed farmers who were meeting all of their proportional obligations under a settlement agreement, but because their groundwater district hadn't met those, they were being curtailed. And so this new agreement speaks to that piece, and we will be doing curtailment moving forward. It comes to that at the farm scale and not at the groundwater district scale. So there won't be any, what many people refer to as good actors being punished because of the actions of the bad actors. And then finally, and critically, it calls for in-season groundwater measurement. And I think that's just something that we have to have. I referred to these areas in Kansas and Nebraska where they are implementing groundwater management plans that are similar to the one that's proposed here. And they have real-time measurement of groundwater use in those areas, to my understanding. Earlier this week, I received a petition from the parties to accept and approve the settlement agreement as a mitigation plan. I hope to advertise that plan in the first 2 weeks of December. Assuming no protests, and perhaps that's a big assumption, I'm not sure. But I will review the mitigation plan and issue an order that hopefully will approve it and have it in place by the start of the irrigation season. I've been aware of the plan and through its development. I don't know of any fatal flaws with it. I don't see that there's going to be any road bumps, but I haven't done that review yet and we haven't advertised it. And so we don't know where the proceeding might go. But I'm hopeful that we'll have it in place by the start of the next irrigation.
Perhaps well in advance.
Perhaps. And of course, it's hard to speak about the delivery call settlement agreement without acknowledging where we are with the development of a groundwater management plan on the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. And I just want this board to know that I'm committed to developing and adopting a groundwater management plan on the Eastern Snake Plain. But I do have some questions right now regarding the best timing to do that. And there's a lot in this plan that will affect a future groundwater management plan. And I think we need some time for some of the major components in this plan to be implemented and to play out. And also to allow time for a priority to bring in tributary basins and other groundwater users into the proceeding so that we can start to implement their conservation management activities and weigh the benefits of those. So I would like to implement a plan that is successful. And I think that means budgeting or balancing the water budget, but also being best suited to survive a legal challenge. And I think both of those things are more likely to succeed if we understand the current mitigation plan once adopted and that the groundwater management plan can work in concert with that. Switching topics to the Bigwood groundwater management area update that you received yesterday. Just so you hear it directly from the director, I'm supportive of the 3-year extension. We had hoped to be adopting a plan at this time that would be ongoing, but there was just too much uncertainty in that basin, both from a technical standpoint and administrative standpoint. There's a lot of good things in that plan that we need to pursue over the next 3 years, so that I'm hopeful in 3 years we will be adopting what I would call a permanent and ongoing plan. So I want to again applaud everyone's work in that area. Shelley Keene, Deputy Director, presided over that. I think he did an outstanding job. Two Corys in our Southern Regional Office supported him in that. One was Corey Skinner, our regional manager, and then of course the board participation. At least 3 board members have been on again, off again on that, and at least one of them has been overtime on that issue. So thank you for your work on that. There is at least one vacancy on that advisory committee. I have received letters of interest from many parties to fill that opening. And I anticipate perhaps 1 or 2 more vacancies on that advisory committee. So I will be waiting for all of those announcements to come in before I make a decision on replacing advisory committee members to that. So I would hope to have decisions on that made by January of next year, depending on the timing of when those materials come in. We had a great presentation yesterday on the Mountain Home Plateau groundwater modeling needs, which we now think will be incorporated into a new Western Snake. Let's see, I called it the Western Snake Plain Aquifer Modeling, and they said, just call it WESPAM. So there's some modeling humor for you, I guess, and that maybe is the acronym of the new model going forward. So we'll have an ESPAM and a WESPAM. And I think, Mr. Chairman and Member Barker, you had a good question regarding the resources that it takes to build, but also importantly to maintain and operate these groundwater models. And you've heard me talk to you several times in the past about the demand for groundwater models. You know better than I the resources, money, and staffing that it takes to build these and get them in place. And the question was made, what resources do we need to operate and maintain them? And I thought a good analogy perhaps would be to look at the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer model. This last year took about 1.25 FTEs to maintain and operate that model. I think in some years when it's busy, it could take as many as 2 people. But I also think that model is exceptional in the fact that it's used for administration, it's used for planning. So we don't have another model that's used as frequently or relied upon as much for administration as that model. But perhaps an estimate for a WeSpan model, depending on how it were to be utilized, might be 1 FTE to operate and maintain that model. And then I also just want to emphasize, again, you've heard this before, but the modeler perhaps gets all the glory for maintaining and operating and building that model, but it takes significant resources in our hydrology section to collect the data, to collect all of the input that goes into that model. And so it is a significant effort to build, but also to operate and maintain those models. And that comes around to another topic that I think we're going to need to dive into here in the next year or two, and that's the repayment of the Pristine Springs settlement agreement. The board received $716,000 a year for that. That money goes into our comprehensive aquifer management plan account, which had $12 million seed money placed in it back in 2010, perhaps in that era. And we use that to pay for a significant number of staff at the department. And during the Great Recession, there was a reduction in the department's budget of somewhere on the order of 25%. And to minimize staffing impacts from that, we implemented these processes of using the camp money to pay for that. And so $670,000 of the 716 goes to modelers and hydrologists and hydrogeologists at the department. And then another $470,000, which is a combination of that repayment plus spending down that seed money that was placed in the camp account, goes towards engineers and project managers here at the department. And they don't exclusively do board work, but they do a lot of board work.
Well, I think Dean ought to just keep paying the 716, then we wouldn't have a problem.
That too shall end.
Can I second that motion? All right. Switching gears now to the water supply bank, another area where we had a lot of discussion and I thought a lot of good comments. And I think I'm probably philosophically aligned with a lot of what I heard yesterday in that discussion. And I do think we have some areas of improvement that we could make in our water supply bank program. And I think we could evaluate processes in that program, and I think we should. I think we have antiquated or no computerized workflow developed for that program like we have in other water right programs. So there's the real ability to program and create applications that could support in that processing. Perhaps our fees need to be evaluated in that program. But from my perspective, over the last couple of years, there's been a real issue with consistency and staffing, and not so much the program coordinator who comes and presents to you. Mary has been pretty consistent in that group and has done a good job. But you saw in her presentation that a significant amount of that work is done by staff in our water rights section. And just in the last year alone, we've had the allocations bureau chief position turnover. We've had the water rights section manager position turnover, and we've had one of our supervisor positions turnover. So there's been a lot of turnover there. So people learning new jobs and learning the water supply bank, where many of them haven't had a history or familiarity with it. But also significantly, you might recall several fiscal year cycles ago, we got a budget approved that called for 15 new FTEs to the department, one of which was a principal water resource agent to support and coordinate water supply bank processing in the water rights section. And that position went unfilled, not unadvertised, not through our efforts to fill it, but it went unfilled for almost 18 months before we got someone into that role who's been in that role here for a couple of months. I'm glad to see that person in it. I'm hopeful that he's going to do a really good job. And so I think with some consistency in staffing and being fully staffed, and if we can keep that over the next year, we'll see just by that alone some significant strides in that program. So I think what I would say is if you're agreeable to it, let's wait and see how the next year plays out with the water supply bank program, and then pick this discussion up after we've seen how the staffing can impact some of the metrics associated with the program. I want to thank Garrick for his comments regarding the contested case proceeding legislation that we might anticipate seeing. Perhaps you remember or don't, but we saw proposals for this in the last year. I remember meeting with co-chairs of JFAC specifically on this topic. And Jennifer, if you would pull up my slide that I presented to the Interim Natural Resource Committee meeting here a couple of weeks. Now, the chairman heard my comments on this, so this is going to be a bit of a recycle for you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but the rest of you perhaps haven't heard them. And this certainly was a passion topic for the previous director, but I also share a lot of the concerns that he had were the department to lose the ability to preside over its contested case matters. In this slide highlights the department's recently contested caseload and some key points regarding our work. So IDWR has averaged 47 contested case matters a year over the last 5 years. And the majority of those contested cases are resolved by hearing officers within the department, of which we have a core of 7 internal hearing officers, 2 candidates in training. But then also, and importantly, I've been relying on independent hearing officers since I took the job. And have relied on former Supreme Court Justices Gerald Schroeder and Roger Burdick. And Roger Burdick also was a presiding judge in the SRBA to handle all of the contested case proceedings associated with the delivery calls on the Eastern Snake Plain. So when I became director, I heard the message that you need to rely on people outside of the department to decide these matters. And I have committed to, and I think can report to you, have carried that out and am committed to continuing in that practice. Talking a little bit about the types of cases that we have. We have many challenging contested cases that involve a complex mixture of technical and legal issues, requiring technical expertise, water right expertise, and legal expertise. And as an example, I want to highlight a recent contested case proceeding that our Eastern Regional Manager, James Cephalo, presided over, and that's the Perpetua mine water right applications. The record that was developed through that proceeding was over 10,000 pages. Many of it was technical engineering and geologic reports. Now, James is an outstanding hearing officer. He has degrees in engineering and in law and 15 years of experience at the department. And I think he, although his decision was appealed, I think he did a good job of getting through that process, handling the parties, handling the technical complexity of it, and getting an order issued. So we have very complicated matters, and the thought of giving this type of work to people outside of the department who don't have that experience concerns me. But perhaps the piece of it that concerns me the most is if this were to go to another agency, they would need to develop the resources that we have at the department, and I might find myself competing with yet another state agency for the same technical and legal resources that are already very hard to acquire. I'll point out that the majority of our contested case proceedings are not controversial. Many are resolved through informal settlements or formal settlements. There's almost never a request to disqualify a hearing officer, although we've had 2 such requests in the last year. And most of the orders that we issue at the end of those contested case proceedings are not appealed. But what we are aware of is the very contentious legal proceedings that surround largely the delivery call proceedings on the Eastern Snake Plain. So just as a reminder, most of the work gets done efficiently and without controversy. And then finally, I want to highlight the department's appeal record, because one frustration I have is I know many people are quite upset with the decisions the department has issued. But I think from my perspective, what they're frustrated with is the underlying law. And the reason for that opinion is that we have many decisions that are appealed, and we have an outstanding record on appeal. And so if we think of the number of decisions that have been issued that have been appealed to the district court, dating back to 2017. So we've had 19 decisions appealed to the district court, and the Department of Water Resources prevailed on 16 of those appeals. 2 of the decisions that we did not prevail on were appealed to the Idaho Supreme Court, where the Idaho Supreme Court reversed the district court and found in favor of the department. The one case in which that didn't happen had to do with the issue of should we use surface water on land before we develop new groundwater if it already exists there. The department said, yes, if you have surface water, you need to use that before you develop new groundwater. The district court said, no, you don't. That's not in the law. It's a good practice, but not in the law. And the Supreme Court upheld the district court. And during the next session, we changed our laws such that there was more legal support for that conclusion, because it is a good water management practice to rely on the surface water first before developing groundwater, certainly in those places where groundwater is scarce. Dating back to 2017, we've had 6 decisions challenging IDWR's actions that have been appealed to the Idaho Supreme Court, and IDWR prevailed on all 6 of those decisions. In one case, the South Valley Groundwater District versus IDWR specifically addressed procedural due process, and the court affirmed the department's administrative procedural process in handling the delivery call proceedings. So I think that's a credit to our legal staff and our technical staff and the expertise that we have at the department. You've heard me say that when it comes to conjunctive management, it's contentious, but we have in our constitution, in our statutes, in our rules, and through more than 2 decades of case law now, a lot of legal foundation for how to carry these proceedings out. And I think the department has been doing a good job at complying with the law through these very difficult processes. I think I'll conclude my comments there, Mr. Chairman, unless there's other questions you'd like to ask.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments related to Matt's report?
No, never mind.
Thank you.
Brian.
Chairman Matt, just one question. So Lieutenant Governor alluded to it that the measurement, we've got the monthly. I know we've talked internally about how the telemetry is going to work and how's it going to interface with well, particularly Craig and Water District 1. Does the department have a method that's we're going to try to get this more up to date, more real-time recording, or is that just down the road somewhere?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, that's a good question. I will just point out that Water District 1 only does surface water. So the Water District administration of the groundwater rights is done through Water Districts 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 147. Anyway, there's a number of them there. And that collection of data is often done in coordination between the Water District and the Groundwater District. So in our comments on this, we talked about the need for standardization of a process for that. I had a question to you, and I still don't know the answer to that. When does the settlement agreement require in-season measurement of groundwater use? I think it's in the 2nd year of the agreement, not
Starting in
in
2026.
Starting in 2026. So we do have some time to work out those procedures, but I will say that I think it's important, and I'm committed to making sure that the water districts have the processes in place so that we are getting monthly measurements of groundwater use consistent with the settlement agreement.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? I think you can make your getaway. Okay, next on the agenda is 2025 board meeting dates. I think we all have a copy of that somewhere in front of us.
Yes, we do. We have a memo here that lays out proposed meeting dates for calendar year 2025. We would appreciate your adoption of this meeting schedule so Jennifer can start making accommodations in these various locations.
Okay.
Second. All look familiar.
Okay, they're all in Idaho. I keep thinking there must be some reason we should meet in Hawaii once in a while, but doesn't come up, so.
Hawaii, did you say?
Hawaii.
We can go to Hawaii.
It's like Hawaii, only different.
Yeah. Let's see, maybe if you could make a motion for Hawaii, Jennifer might hear Hawaii. Okay, all right, we have a motion to adopt the meeting dates for 2025. There's no further discussion. We'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Non-action items for discussion. Brian O. You have anything? Pat? Dale? Joanne? Dean? Al?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Mark?
No, sir.
Okay, that gets us to the last item on the agenda. If I could have a motion.
I so move that we adjourn.
Okay, so second, all in favor, say aye. Okay, motion carries. We are done. Thank you, one and all. We've accomplished quite a bit at this meeting, and